I'd like to call this meeting to order. And I'd like to make a motion that we move to executive session pursuant to ARS 38-431.03 A3 and A4 for discussion or consultation for legal advice with the governing board's attorney regarding personal matters and to consider its position and instruct its attorneys regarding its position regarding contexts that are the subject of negotiation.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We will be back. I'd like to make a motion that we reconvene in general session.
Seconded.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye. We will now call this meeting to order. Thank you all for waiting for us. Mrs. Richards? Oh, I'm sorry. Please join me. Oh. Roll call. Roll call. I was right. I was right. I was right. Thank you. Mrs. Richards, roll call, please. Mrs. Reese is confusing me. I don't know why.
President Schultz, members of the board, let the record show that all 5 board members are present.
Thank you. Now, would you please join me in a moment of silence? I'd like to make a motion that we approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Mrs. Richards, Superintendent's report.
Yes. There we are. Tonight we have another exciting episode of Higley Adventures to share with you. Coronado Elementary's PTO met their goal of raising $44,000 during their recent fundraiser. Reaching this goal will ensure that all PTO events are free, and it will also help with the renovation of their library. So we want to show you just a little glimpse of Principal Armstrong. And we also want to thank all of our PTOs across the district, as well as our booster clubs. We couldn't do what we do without you. A local law firm recently honored a Higley Academy teacher, Hope Berg, as their August Teacher of the Month. She was featured on a billboard and also presented with a $500 check. That's exciting. Congratulations to our 4 Higley High School students who have been awarded national recognition from the College Board. Congratulations to Haley Vasquez, Mitsu Navarro, Jaden O'Hare, and Mason Anderson. These students earned this academic honor because of their GPA of 3.5 or higher and outstanding performance on the PSAT, the PSAT 10, and or AP exams. Now they can list these honors on their applications to colleges when they apply. So let's give them a round of applause. Congratulations to our 5 Williamsfield High School students who have also been awarded national recognition from the College Board. Congratulations to Daniel Romero, Emma Childress, Yaden Lott, Kieran Kent, and Maya Cruz. These students earned these honors because of a GPA of 3.5 or higher, outstanding performance on the PSAT or the PSAT 10 and AP exams. They will also list all of these accomplishments on their application, so let's give them a round of applause. Hayden is one of our Higley High School students. She was recently featured in Hearing Our Way magazine, which is the only magazine for kids and teens with hearing loss. Hayden worked alongside our HUSD teacher for the hearing impaired to write the article featured in the magazine. We're so proud of you, Hayden. Are they? Okay. All right. Now, nobody's looking forward to this, but we have a surprise. Fall break, September 25th through October 6th. Who wants to give a round of applause for that? Our next board meeting will be Wednesday, October 11th, here at the district office. And we have a school site visit to Santan Elementary on Friday, October 20th, and we hope you guys will join us.
Thank you. Request to speak. At this time, I'd like to read this. We value input from our constituents. The time on our agenda has been set aside for anyone from the audience who wishes to address the board. Those that wish to speak should have filled out speaker cards, which are due prior to the start of our meeting. Members of the board may not discuss, comment, or take action on matters raised that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for future consideration and decision at a later date. Also, we ask that audience members practice proper public meeting decorum, refraining from either negative or positive responses, including clapping or verbal outbursts, to ensure fairness to all points of view. Those that refuse to follow these rules will be asked to leave. Speakers, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Thank you for your cooperation. First up, we have Mr. Wyatt Ford.
Share with all of you. Should I restart or? Sorry. Yesterday, September 19th, was my son's book fair event for his school. We saw a variety of different books, from informative dinosaur monographs to Pokemon comic books and everything in between. Once we were finished browsing the side aisles, we decided to head to the front of the book fair. There, propped up front and center of the venue, was a book titled In the Spirit of a Dream by Ada Salazar. Upon opening the book, I was appalled at what I saw. Here's one of the excerpts I read verbatim. "We come as migrants, often unwanted, to this country that will always belong to the First Nations to inhabit it." This quote is further substantiated in the table of contents section by a chapter labeled Undocu Poets. For those still wondering, meaning illegal aliens. Per Scholastic, on their official website, this book has a target audience of 5 to 7-year-olds. Why? This book is teaching our kids that no matter what they do, this country will never belong to them. Why? Need I mention our state's deteriorating border crisis? It's unfathomable to me that this rhetoric is available, especially given our circumstances. Simply put, this is my land. This is my children's land. This is my first-generation Honduran grandmother's land. I serve this country. My ancestors served this country. Men and women have fought and died to be able to say, this is our country. The United States of America, home of the brave. Furthermore, I would like to clear any notion that this may be directed at Higley Unified School District. It is not. The most you folks can do is try to get Scholastic, the entertainment company that provided the aforementioned book, out of your schools. You may still be asking, why? Undisputedly, BlackRock Incorporated Investment Group purchased just under 5 million shares of Scholastic in January of 2022. Those numbers are still active as of 2023, per NASDAQ's official filing report. This is 15.4% of the Scholastic company. BlackRock is a company that has destroyed the middle class and that has left our housing market in ruins. They are also publicly endorsed by the World Economic Forum, as per the World Economic Forum's official website. Thank you to all of the Higley Unified School District staff for what you do. As for BlackRock and the World Economic Forum, we see what you are doing. Without political bias, you may control some of those who make laws. You tell us you will own nothing and be happy. Well, I say when tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes duty. Sic semper tyrannis. Thank you.
Next up, we have Ira Latham.
President Schultz, members of the board, my name is Ira Latham. I have 4 children that attend in the Higley Unified School District. I'm here today to talk about the proposed dress code changes that are up for voting. I spoke before on the dress code changes. It was voted down for much of the same reason I think that it should be voted down this time. I read through the dress code, the new proposal. It's much more wordy this time, but it says the exact same essential thing. It's my request, President Schultz and members of the board, that you reject this current proposal and you either enforce the current dress code that we have or you have a dress code that reflects more of the concerns of the parents in the district. As a parent, I expect the district to be able to enforce policies that help my children be able to go to class and know how they can contribute to a safe classroom environment, as well as limiting the needless distractions in the class. This policy does not do that. I also think that it brings a lot of unnecessary pressure on teachers having to deal with the vagueness of this policy. Because I have no other way to describe my concerns about this policy, I'll do an object lesson. This is what I do for my kids when I have to tell them why we're doing things the way we need to do them. Under the proposed policy, this would be appropriate in a classroom. Wow. Now, if you ask me, this is inappropriate for a board meeting. If you have a dress code policy that allows us in a classroom, it does not promote a safe classroom environment, as well as limiting the amount of distractions in the classroom. I would like to request that the board reject this current policy, either enforce the policy that we have, or have a policy that reflects more concerns that reflects with what conducts a better environment for the students, for them to get the most education out of the class, as well as prepare them to enter the workforce when they leave the school. I can't think of any place of work where I could walk in an interview and be taken serious in something like this. So let's be adults for these students. Let's put the right policies in place to help them have success in the future. Thank you.
Monica Latham.
As shown, thank you for letting us speak. As shown, we are super passionate about our kids in this environment. I don't care what other districts do. That's not what we're here for. We are here for the kids in this district, and we're trying to make a difference for our kids, for our kids' future. This is super important to us because changing this dress code does not help the education whatsoever for our children. It actually hinders them because you are going to get different shapes and sizes. That's not a problem. But you will get more bullying that will happen. Girls are just mean, boys are mean. They will do it to these individuals if this dress code is passed. Also, I have heard of teachers that turn their room into ice boxes because they do not want to be known as sexist or favoring or whatnot other students, and they make sure that they turn them into ice boxes so that they wear and cover themselves so they don't have to deal with any of that. This is inappropriate what they're asking for the school attire to be approved. I really hope you can reconsider because it's not fair to the teachers, it's not fair to the students, and as parents, I know 5 families that took their kids out of school this last year because of things that have been passed, and I would not be surprised if more people pull their kids out of school and money out of this district if this dress code gets approved. Thank you for your time.
Linda Pate.
Hi, I have 9 grandchildren in this school district, and I would also like to address the dress code. I've watched through the years, and it's gotten worse and worse, and I think a lot of it is because it's not being enforced. The dress code that we have right now needs to be enforced, or it needs to become more modest. We are letting our kids' education go bad because the young men, I'm sorry, the pornography and stuff that is out there, they can get it on the internet, but they can come to school and see it at the schools, which is totally wrong, and it's due to the non-compliance in making the dress code enforced, and so that was one of the things I wanted to talk about. Also, I wanted to talk about I'd like our school district to become a model for other schools on having a really good dress code. Instead of following the styles that the other schools have, why don't we become the best and have people that want to come to Higley instead of people that want to leave? We have a lot of people leaving this district because of dress code and because of the education that's being taught. And I know the education comes from the top, and you have to kind of teach some of that, but we're going to try and change some of that, I hope, through the parents getting involved. And plus, our state board is really on target on helping with that, and I'm really grateful because one of them is here today. Thank you. Also, I would like to talk about a couple of times ago, it's about 2 months ago, there was one of the board members that was very rude to another board member. And the rest of the board members sat there and allowed that to happen for 5 minutes. I was totally appalled. And I would hope that from now on, you would think about yourself and think about yourself being in that position and not allow that to happen. It was not a very good situation, and I would really appreciate if you guys would support one another in helping one another and pulling together instead of pulling apart. We, as a district, could be absolutely wonderful. I've lived here 30 years, and it used to be really, really good. The modesty was much, much better. We need to get the modesty back in this school. It is really, really suffering, and I think that if you would start enforcing the dress code or even make it more modest, you would find a lot of students coming back, and you would find a lot of people wanting to move here. And I thank you for your time. I appreciate the good things that are happening, but I'm really, really concerned with especially our young men having to watch this pornography in the schools with their fellow students that are in the classroom with them. And that's why, they don't want to study a lot. They would rather watch that. So anyway, I would appreciate you considering it. Thank you very much.
Heather Balch. Heather, did I say that right? You did. I'm sorry, I think I've said it wrong before then. I apologize.
I got smart.
I know, I'm sorry. Thank you.
No problem at all. Good evening, Governing Board, Cabinet members of our wonderful Higley team. I am Heather Balch. I've been in the district for 20 plus years, and I do serve on our executive board of our Higley Education Association. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about that tonight. Higley Education Association's mission is to advocate for education professionals, both certified and classified, and to unite members to fulfill the promise of public education to prepare every student in a diverse and interdependent world. Our goal for the 23-24 school year is to help HUSD retain staff members, and we believe that open communication is the best place to start. So we've been talking, and here's what we've heard so far. Higley teachers love Higley. Higley staff loves Higley. Our staff feels supported by their administrators. Substitutes love working in our district. They talk about how supported they are by their schools, as well as how respectful the students are to them. So I thought that was really cool. PTOs on the campuses, I saw PTO back there, woo-woo. They support their campuses and provide the needed supplies for all kinds of events and activities. Overall, our employees love the culture that is created here in Higley. On behalf of the Higley Education Association Executive Board, I pledge that we will continue to support the collaboration between teachers and staff with administration so that we as a district can provide the best public education experience for our students. Thank you guys so much.
Nancy nope, I'm messing that up. Wilming? Is there a Nancy? Nancy, can you please tell me how to say your last name?
Wilming.
Thank
Like Wilmington, but without the 10. I'm a grandparent. My grandchildren have and do go to Higley schools. I'm going to speak about the dress code, and I am simply going to read some definitions from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, which one would assume to be currently applied in the Higley Unified School District. Number 1, school, an organization that provides instruction to acquire knowledge or skill. Number 2, instruction, formal teaching. Number 3, educate, implies development of the mind. 4, standard, established by authority having recognized and permanent value. Number 5, code, a system of principles. Number 6, discipline, training in habits of order and rules. Number 7, decency, code of ethics, socially accepted behavior, conduct that conforms to a standard of right or wrong. Profession, a vocation, trade, or occupation. Number 9, skill, proficiency at executing something. With all these words and definitions in mind, these are the reasons we send our children to school. This is the guidance we expect in order to set them on a path to achieving their individual goals. I find the need for a very clear, dignified, established dress code to be much needed requirement in our schools. This will habituate our children to an environment and a manner of dressing that will enhance and optimize their chances of success as adults. Thank you.
Linda Manning. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I missed one, sorry. Ginger Smith.
Hi, my name is Ginger Smith. I have 3 girls in the area, And I feel like we're forgetting that we're not just raising girls. We are trying to raise women to be leaders in society. But we're allowing them to believe that they're nothing but objects. When we allow our children whose brains are not completely formed yet to believe that they're in control over what they get to wear, I want them to be able to express themselves, but we need to be leading by example and sharing with them that express yourself in dignity and respect. If you can't respect yourself, I'm not sure how you can respect others. So it's a distraction, yes, that's also a concern, but also just we need to be raising these girls to be women in society and to have that self-respect and dignity. That's what we need to really focus on as a society. And that's all I have for tonight.
Linda Manning.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me. And hi. I just wanted to address the peaks behind me. I've been part of the Higley School District for 18 years. My husband and I adopted my 3 grandchildren. They went to Cortina, they went to Sossaman, and they came over to the high school. There might be people in this room that might recognize me. I was a permanent fixture in Cortina, in Sossaman, in Higley High School, daily. When I took on my grandchildren, we had certain standards. My daughter had gone through a rough time, and because of that, we reached in to save these children. I was very happy with the Higley School District, and I will go on to say one statement: sex sells. That has been the mantra for as far back as I can remember, from toothpaste to toilet paper. Chocolate, doesn't matter. Hollywood, all the rest of it, it's all about that. What I had seen over these years that my grandchildren were attending here, one who was the head of the yearbook, another one that got an award for Trailblazer, all with 4.0 grade point averages. The youngest one just started ASU, doing wonderfully. My husband was in the Marine Corps. He died with 4 Purple Hearts. We had strict rules at home. Children need boundaries. They beg for boundaries. Never once did I ever see, and God bless her, I became very good friends with Nancy Diab, who was the principal at Cortina. And as my children left Cortina and they went over to Sossaman, so did she. And when she left there and she came over to Higley, so did they. So I've known her for a very, very long time. She knew the dynamics of my household. Excuse me. Hope I get that second back. She knew the dynamics of my household. And because of that, she knew how important it was for me to keep a very close, watchful eye on my grandchildren. Because my daughter suffered at the hands of an abuser, a sexual abuser, a groomer, my antenna are up. I don't know if we have numbers of how many in the different school districts and departments that have been charged with sexual assault. It might be a number we want to look into. But when I walked into the high school one day and I saw this girl come walking out, I thought to myself, where the hell am I? Are you kidding me right now? Somebody let her out the door like this? Shame on the parent. However, at the same token, the school has allowed it. Nancy Diab had a motto, a school dance. My granddaughter came down over the stairs. I said, oh, no, get those shoes off. First of all, you'll be carrying them all night. Second of all, it could be a school dance. She had 2 fingers, lasagna, no spaghetti. For me, being Italian, I was all over that. If they weren't in the dress code, they were not allowed entry. These girls need to be respected.
Thank you. Your time is up.
We don't know who's in that school and what they're thinking while they're peering down a young lady's
Your time is up. Thank you.
While they can see what they had.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Uniforms might be a good idea. That's what I really wanted to throw in.
Moving on to the consent agenda, I make a motion that we approve items 6.1 through 611.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye. The what? I think, yeah. Opposed? Any opposed?
No, but I do have a comment.
Do you want to finish the vote and then make the comment? Okay, so all 4-0?
Yes.
Okay, 4-0. Mrs. Van Hook?
And the only reason why I'm commenting is because I didn't get the answers to the questions till after the agenda was posted. But I did see that there was a question regarding the supplementals for staff. And there was a question in regards to an amount that was on there due to a contract of a little over $4,000. And it was asked how this was an elementary teacher receiving a certain amount. But it was, the response back to that question was, this is an error, should read HEA president stipend, to which my response was that this was discussed in a previous board meeting, that I still don't understand why we are using taxpayer dollars to pay stipends to the HEA president when they are getting their dues paid by teachers to represent them. So if they're attending events as an HEA rep, why are we using taxpayer dollars to pay them to do what they signed up to do for HEA? That's all. I just wanted to point that out.
Moving on to information item 7.1.
President
Mrs.
Schultz.
Richardson.
Yes, we had a board member ask for this policy to be on the board agenda for discussion. This is policy BEDD, Rules of Order. We also have Ms. Jennifer McClellan here, should we have questions or need additional clarification.
Perfect, thank you. I believe this is when you need to.
What you were saying.
Okay.
So I asked for this policy to be brought forward due to the reason that at the last board meeting when we were discussing the dress code, Vice President Anderson made a motion to amend the policy. And I seconded that motion, and we had a vote on the floor, and instead of voting on that motion, another motion was made to table it. And then that motion got a second, and that one got a vote, but the original motion that was made was dismissed, and so the amendments never were made because that motion never got a vote. So I wanted to ask that we amend the rules of order to say that, so under the line where it says the motion requirement, where each action requires a motion, all motions must be seconded before discussion or voting, and then to add an order of motion which would state a motion must be voted on before another motion can be made. Because otherwise, we can just keep making motions on top of everybody's motions, and the initial motion could never get a vote. So that's just something that I wanted to get added to this policy.
So if we added that to the policy, then the second vote, or the amended would never have made it. So Mrs. Anderson's never would have been able to make that motion because we've already, if we voted, and presumably the vote would have died, it wouldn't have passed, we wouldn't have been able to add something else to the agenda for a new vote because it's not on the agenda. So it never would have happened. Am I correct?
Madam President, Ms. Van Hook, I think what you're saying is that if that language were added, that you couldn't amend a motion. And I do believe that would be a unintended consequence of that language. And if that language is added, you will also have to reconcile the discrepancy between that language and the language later in your policy that states that a motion to table is in order at any time.
So the motion would have never been able to happen because it would have died and it's not on our agenda. And so that's what essentially we would be eliminating the ability to even amend an agenda item. Am I saying, I just want to make sure, asking legal so that I'm saying that correctly.
Madam President, Ms. Van Hook, so if that language is added, if a motion was made, you would have to vote on it to be able to amend it. And once you vote on an agenda item, there would not be the ability, then it either passes or fails. So you're correct that once that a motion is made, you would not be able to amend it, you would have to vote on it, and then if it didn't pass, you would be required to consider it at the next board meeting.
Because the agenda item itself is the original motion, correct? That's why that is, because the agenda item to discuss, we have to do an original motion. So that's the first motion. The amendment was in fact the second motion in order of what happened for the dress code.
We can't just add an agenda item to.
So not just speaking for an amendment, but in any situation, if there's a motion made on any situation, not just an amendment, and then somebody can just make a motion on top of that.
Madam
So
President.
how do
Ms.
we
Van Hook,
resolve the situation where if there's a motion to be able to vote on the motion other than tabling, can they make any other motion on top of another motion without getting a vote?
Madam President, Ms. Van Hook, under your current rules, you could make a motion and then amend the motion. That's what happened the night that we were doing the second read for the dress code policy. And that's permissible both under your current rules and under Robert's Rules of Order. And similarly, your governing board policy BEDD allows a motion to table at any time, as does Robert's Rules of Order. But the language that you're proposing currently would require that once a motion is made and second, it be voted on, if I understand your language correctly. And that would eliminate the ability for the board to amend a motion.
Got it. Okay.
Any other questions, concerns? Mrs. Wade?
I would also like to express that I think the only reason we tabled over that amendment is because neither the policy itself, the agenda item, would have passed, because based off conversation, only 2 of us supported it the way it was. When you motioned for the amendment, it also still would not have passed because only 2 people supported with the amendment attached, which is why we tabled it to readdress and then come back at a different date. So it wasn't
This
in
isn't
efforts to
about
like stifle.
the dress code in particular, it's just the policy itself.
That's fair, but I feel like, I think it's important that if we're making an amendment, the idea that you would have another motion to amend something else, logistically, we would have to vote before we look at a second amendment in order to progress, so we're making sure we're keeping in line with our language. A motion to a table, I think, should be protected in terms of superseding. So if we have another situation in which we can't come to a consensus and we can't move forward, instead of it dying, come back and give it life again.
The other thing it would do is handcuff us to be able to make an amendment. So if you did want to make an amendment, or if somebody wanted to make an amendment on the board, they wouldn't no longer be allowed to do so.
Right. I understand. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Moving on to 7.2, BDG, school attorney, the first read. And this is
Yes.
Mrs. Richards or Mrs. Van Hook will start? Okay.
It's a board member asked for this policy. BDG school attorney to be on the agenda for discussion.
All right. So for this policy, the second sentence, where it says the superintendent shall designate those employees of the district categorically or individually who may consult with staff attorney or an attorney from a pool of which the district is a member. So there's three things that on this policy I wanted to see if we can amend. So for that section, if we were to switch the verbiage to say the superintendent can recommend district staff to the board for approval to consult with district attorney. And then, yeah, so that whole sentence would switch to that, to where the recommendation would come to the board and then the board would approve that recommendation.
I know, I wish we had this in front of us because I'm having trouble following.
Sorry. So the second paragraph that's on the current policy to be changed to, so instead of the superintendent designating the employees that could contact or consult with the attorney, that the superintendent would recommend district staff to the board for approval to consult with district attorney.
Can I ask why you would like that?
For the purpose of being able to bring back some of the controls to the board, because based on this policy, a lot of the attorney responsible, like contacts with the attorney, are attached to the superintendent. And I believe that that should be something that the board should be able to approve or deny.
I think there's some unintended consequences with language like that.
And don't take the words exactly, it's just the recommendation.
No, I hear you, and I understand your purpose, but there's a lot of legal matters that are a time of essence. And for instance, our next board meeting's not until October 11th. We have special education that works with attorneys all the time to make sure that, you know, laws are changed and that we're following what we're supposed to and things like that. They work hand in hand with the attorneys from the trust and our pool of attorneys that we can work with. HR, if there is a personnel issue that we need advice from an attorney. I mean, if there's a tough situation that we're dealing with and we need to get advice from attorneys before we can do something to make sure we're legally covered, they wouldn't be able to do that until we gave approval.
But these people are, these individuals are selected ahead of time.
Well, that's what this says, is they're essentially, it's cabinet members who, if need be, can reach out to district, or to, I want to say, the district attorneys, the attorneys that represent our district. So it's not anyone individually that's being able to do that. The superintendent's not going and saying, oh, well, you have permission to contact an attorney. Now, if there's a situation that our superintendent's handling with an individual and it may not be one of our cabinet members that we need some legal advice on, that the superintendent's going to make that initial phone call together and say, hey, this is our situation. I have this person with me. Can you help us? And even if at that point our superintendent has to bow out for whatever reason, but individuals don't, within our district, just don't have the authority to go and use the counsel that represents the district.
Right.
There are certain, like it says categorically, so, special education director, not anyone within special education has the ability to utilize our counsel.
Right, so those people are selected ahead of time anyway, right?
Yes, there are certain departments and head of departments, I guess, if you will, those individuals may consult
Right.
with an attorney.
So what difference would it make to have those approved by the board?
Okay,
Or-
so now that sounds something different to me. So you're asking that the individuals be identified. It sounded like you were asking before they could contact counsel.
No,
That, okay.
ahead of time, yeah.
So instead of leaving it so vague on just individuals, similar to what we have approved for the hearing officers, like we
Right.
got a list. So if we can have a list of who has the authority to do that,
Right.
is what you're asking
And to be
for.
able to, as a board, approve that list.
Like
yes.
annually
Yeah.
or something, okay. I thought you were asking that before they could contact legal counsel, that it had to come before the
No,
board.
no.
And that was not
Yeah,
gonna
no.
work out well. Okay, that makes some different sense. I'll leave that for some discussion at that point.
Should I go on with the rest, or is there further discussion just for that line?
Madam President, may I be heard
Yes, please.
on one concern that I have? So if what the board is proposing is to allow the superintendent to give a list and only those people are authorized to contact legal counsel, there is a concern that I would have that if another individual in your district is required to speak with legal counsel and they're not on that list, that might be a violation of your policy. And I'll give you some examples. So today I spoke with a district principal, district assistant principal, urgent matter related, not your school district, related to a proposed expulsion. And if those individuals, certainly the assistant principals are not likely to be on that list, that was the individual who had the knowledge that I needed. Another situation that comes up frequently is where you all are subpoenaed, your individual employees are subpoenaed. Sometimes that's your teachers. And so typically those individuals would never be authorized to get legal consult, but they are under your current agreements. So if you are going to adopt language like that, you would still need to give your superintendent discretion to approve the use of legal counsel for those times when those individuals couldn't come back to the board to get your approval.
I think your intent is to initiate, is that correct? I mean, because in those circumstances, yes, those individuals would need to speak with legal counsel, but they're not necessarily the ones who initiated the...
Right, yeah, so for there to be an initial list, and then from there, like, as-needed basis, and again, like whatever I wrote down isn't obviously the legal language that would be in there, but just to get the point across, is to be able to, just like those officers, to be able to get an approved list initially, and then if there's other, emergency cases that need to be added. So did those individuals, let's say somebody is subpoenaed, do they contact you directly, or do they contact Sherry and then go through Sherry to get to the attorney?
Madam President, Ms. Van Hook, in all instances in all school districts that I work with, especially with the prepaid legal system, there are only, it would go through the superintendent or the superintendent's designee to make contact with the attorney for the public body to get the legal resource. So I believe that happens already. I have not been contacted directly by anyone other than Sherry Richards since she's taken the helm.
Got it, yeah. So to initiate. Yeah. Right.
Not to talk to, but initiate that.
Right.
Can I ask a clarifying question? I'm just trying to understand, I guess, the necessity of it. Outwardly, I look at everybody that exists within the district office and within our district as a whole. And I wouldn't know or have any real reason to have an understanding of what I would be approving in terms of what needs to be done versus what's not, what is a good list, what isn't. And I think part of that is because that's not my job, right? And I guess I'm just trying to understand, like, if the desire is because you want more control from the board to be able to have a say in some of these things, I understand that for certain areas. I guess I'm just confused as to why this is an area of concern. Like, what about the current system and how it is being done are we unsatisfied with, that would require or necessitate a change just to have more control in an area? That I just don't understand the reasoning from it, I guess, is what I'm trying to understand. Like, what do we hope to gain from this, considering none of us, even based off the questions we've had from the lawyer as we discuss this, really have any clear idea on how frequently, how often, or in what situation, who is needed?
Right, so in that case, if you apply that to these officers, do we have that information about these officers? But we're still having to make that approval, right, as a board. We're having to vote on these officers. So same would apply here. I think what's happened is, in reality, like, I think a lot of the board's work has been, or the board's authority has been given to the superintendent versus the board having to do those things. And so it's a matter of us as a board being able to have a decision in that. And obviously, it would be in conjunction with working with the superintendent to identify those people, but the ultimate approval would come from the board.
I guess what I'm hung up on is, we hire the superintendent. That is where our authority comes in. We are the ones who approve policies. It feels like there's a lack of trust of individuals to do their jobs, and I'm just trying to understand, for example, the hearing people that get recommended to us, it's because they have done their processes already. Any of the time some of these things come up for our approval, it's because they have done their processes already, and I think it's important for us to ask questions, and I think it's important for us to get justification for decisions when we need them. This feels to me like an effort to have more control over something for the sake of control rather than expression that we can trust the individuals in there. If our control came down to this is a policy or a decision that we could have an understanding or an impact of, like, I don't care if at the end of the day we have the list and we go, okay, good on you for that list, but I still want to make sure that the ultimate practice of us as a board, in conjunction with everybody that works from staff to district office as a whole, is that we trust the people to do their job that are in that job. And then when we have reason to not trust, that is when we start following the procedures and policies we have in place. So I guess I just don't really understand the merit of it.
And this isn't a trust issue. Just like they do the work and bring us these officers to approve, they would do the work and bring us this list to approve as well. There's really, it's not a trust issue. It's just being able to have that as the role of the board, which technically it should be. But go ahead, Michelle.
Ms. Richards, I'm not sure if this is for you. Is it McLennan or McClellan?
It's McLennan.
McLennan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No
Sorry.
problem.
So I'm not
You can
sure.
call me anything. Jennifer is fine.
When we are approving the hearing officers, sorry, my voice is going, the hearing officers or the evaluators, we've also approved that list. Is that something that we are mandated to approve, or are we given those names by the district per policy, or is that just a nice thing that you guys do for us?
Madam President, Ms. Anderson, I believe the list of hearing officers you're talking about is a list of hearing officers to hold hearings for personnel matters and that sort of thing. And it is mandated that you decide as a board whether you're going to hear the hearings yourself or whether you're going to approve the hearing officers. You're also required to approve them because you have to procure them. So there's two reasons for that requirement. This would be discretionary.
I can address members of the board. The hearing officers, I think that we're referring to tonight is for the long-term suspension expulsion hearing officers. It's on the agenda, on the consent agenda. Those individuals are brought forward because they've been through and certified by the trust as a trust certified hearing officer to conduct long-term suspension or expulsion hearings. Now, they're certified because the trust asks that we only use a hearing officer that's been through their training, and that will help to keep the school district out of litigation to ensure due process is granted if there ever is an expulsion or long-term suspension. So that's a little bit of a different comparison, because those individuals, if we're going to be backed by the trust for potential litigation, we need to make sure that we're using one of their certified hearing officers who have been certified, passed through the program, and had gone through their standards to be able to hold hearings. So that's why that list is approved, because if we didn't use a trust hearing officer and the hearing was botched and we came back and ended up in litigation, we wouldn't have the support of the trust, potentially.
Answers the hearing officers. What about our evaluators for staff?
So we're required to make sure our evaluators are qualified evaluators and have gone through training. So we always bring you that list of administrators that are qualified to do that. So, sure.
Next section. The fourth paragraph currently says, the superintendent and the board president shall be designated as the representatives of the district who may confer with counsel. The district will not be responsible for fees that accrue because of unauthorized individual board members or staff consultation with private counsel. My recommendation is to change that to say that the superintendent and all board members shall be designated as representative of the district who may confer with counsel for guidance and clarification on legal matters affecting the district or the board. And then obviously the line that says the district will not be responsible for fees because unauthorized staff consultation with private counsel. The main thing here is being able to add all board members, because if there's ever a situation where one or two board members or three, it doesn't matter the number of board members, but if the issue is, let's say, with the superintendent, or if there's an issue with the board president or whatever, and other board members need to be able to contact legal counsel. With our current policy, we're not able to do that. And as board members, I shouldn't have to go through the board president or through the superintendent to be able to speak to legal counsel. I think that we were all elected into these seats for a reason, and we're all equally board members. And just because one carries a title of board president, that shouldn't be it shouldn't exclude all the other board members to be able to have equal access to legal counsel when and if we have questions. So that is why I'd like to be able to add all board members in there. And then at the end of the last paragraph where it says only the superintendent may contact private counsel by telephone or in person regarding matters pertaining to day-to-day operations of the district. This, I don't know if the top portion, what I just added, would, if we were able to change that to all board members, would kind of help that section. But to protect the board, if there was an instance where there was an issue with the superintendent and the day-to-day operations, then are we not allowed to contact legal counsel regarding that? but not where it says only the superintendent.
Well, there's two different things there, because we're not responsible for the day-to-day, the
Correct.
superintendent is.
But if the
So
issue
at that
is-
point is we don't have an issue with the day-to-day operation, we have an issue with the superintendent. So we would have our board president contact legal regarding our superintendent, not the day-to-day operation. So the nitty-gritty, getting in the weeds of the day-to-day operation it's kind of cause and effect. That may be the reason that there's an issue with the superintendent, is what's happening in the day-to-day, but we wouldn't contact them regarding the day-to-day. At that point, the board is contacting legal counsel regarding our superintendent, because then at that point, our issue is with our superintendent,
Right.
not our day-to-day.
So I just feel like it might be like contradictory, or maybe the verbiage can change to where in cases where legal matters relate to the superintendent, the board shall have the right to resolve such issue and may contact private counsel.
I think the wording is the way it is because this is a board policy, like our policy, all of them are board policies, but it's regarding board members, and that board members should not be involved in the day-to-day operations. That's not within our purview. It's not within what we do. And so I think that that's the reason it states that, is that if we don't like how something's happening and going from one department to another department, we don't like that process, and we have some legal concerns about it, that's about the day-to-day operation. Like, we shouldn't be contacting legal counsel about the day-to-day. That should be a conversation with our superintendent. And we can express our concerns if there is any legal concerns or anything, and then that's when they would contact legal counsel, or you can contact them together or whatever. But I think that the reason it's worded that way is because board members don't and shouldn't be involved in the day-to-day operation.
Right. It's not the day-to-day that I'm concerned about. It's just as board members being able to contact legal counsel.
Yeah, but I think that's that part, that last sentence that you were talking about, I think it's purposely in there to avoid board members trying to get legal counsel and guidance regarding the day-to-day operations.
Right.
So I think that the reason the wording is that way is to try and avoid that, saying that our policy, we agree as board members, this is our policy, that we are not permitted to do the day-to-day operations, to contact legal counsel.
And then in the section, it says the attorney retained by the board shall communicate directly with the governing board on such legal matters. So if we were to it's not in the policy, that's just recommended. You're like, where is it? So when, as a board, we do contact legal counsel, that they have the right to speak directly to the board and not have to go through the superintendent.
Now, my experience, and Ms. McClellan can jump in, my experience is anytime we've had to involve legal counsel, whether it's be contracts, whether it's personnel issues or anything that the board has been involved in legal, once that contact is made, in here it's saying through the board president, that at that point, that conversation between legal can happen between individual board members, where if they needed to speak to you about something, that they could contact you without the superintendent. So once the initial consult and process for whatever the situation is going, once legal counsel has been involved, if there is a need to talk to individual board members, they do that. As well as then the communication back, that if there's an email, if they need to keep us updated on something, that they would email the board directly and not
necessarily, it doesn't mean the superintendent's not aware, but it doesn't mean it has to go from the superintendent to the board members, that then there is that conversation and everything directly with legal.
I agree with what the point you're making with the second part of the language and the day-to-day operations, but I want to pose for the first one regarding just the board president, the superintendent and the board president shall, hypothetically, what if there's a situation where the superintendent, not Ms. Richards, was, mishandling money or doing things, and you as a board member, not the president, were aware of it, and the president at the time was unwavering in the support for the superintendent. I'm not saying this has ever happened before. How would that be handled?
Ms. McClellan, I think, from your standpoint, I'll let you answer before I give mine.
Okay. Madam President, Ms. Anderson and Ms. Reese, it's a good point. If the board, in other words, your point is if the board president's cutting off access to the attorney, then how would you get around that if you're not provided? And the answer is very simple. You ask for an executive session. Any board member has the right to ask for an executive session, and the attorney would come. The policy as written is for the purpose of limiting your legal fees. I did just have a sidebar with Mr. Moore, and he indicated that your prepaid legal usage has more than doubled, tripled in the last year. So there's a good purpose to try to limit access to the attorney. And the other concept that you'll have to be aware of when you're tinkering with this policy is that if one of you has a conversation with the attorney for the public body, that attorney is also a conduit under the open meeting law and can't breach open meeting law. So the attorney can't have and multiply conversations between the 5 of you in breach of that law. So there is a reason for that reason to have one person designated. The other issue is that attorneys work for the board as a whole. When I represent Higley Unified, I represent both your district administration and the 5 of you. So to get direction from the attorney, like you have an agenda item today to give direction to the attorney for the public body, and the reason you have that is because the 5 of you have to come to consensus and direct the attorney. So if you have multiple board members contacting counsel with multiple direction being given on whatever matter might exist, the attorney is not going to have a clear course of action and is not going to be able to act. And sometimes those actions have to be taken rapidly. So the policy as written is adopted by the majority of school districts in Arizona for the purpose of providing clear direction to the attorney, not allowing the attorney to adhere to their ethical obligations. Ms. Reese brought up the point that for the most part, if there is an issue that concerns another board member, they are given access, and that you receive communications as a board as a whole from your attorneys when necessary. And that should be the practice of all the law firms that you work with. You may want to consider, to address Ms. Van Hook's concern, 2 things. Number one, if any board member has a legal question, you should be able to ask your superintendent to get the answer, and that answer should be provided to the 5 of you. So if that's not happening, that would be a communication tool you could use without amending board policy. But you could also consider amending board policy to add that at the discretion of the governing board president, authorization may be given to an individual board member to contact counsel, and that would address Ms. Van Hook's concern, but also limit your legal costs.
Sorry, did you have a question? Yeah, so I wanted to be able to get something in policy mainly for the purpose that, hypothetically speaking, issue with board president or superintendent and not being able to go through them, that we still have an ability to be able to call and ask a question even without having to call an executive session. I mean, it would be awful to have to call an executive session and pay for you to come all the way out here when it's a simple question that could be answered over the phone.
Madam President, Ms. Van Hook, I do think you would have that avenue, just not through the telephone, through email, to forward your question to the superintendent and get an answer back.
But if you can't include the superintendent due to an issue, what do you do then?
And Madam President, Ms. Van Hook, if you want to discuss the employment of the superintendent, you should call for an executive session to get your legal advice, because that, especially in that situation, most open meeting law allegations that come forward concern personnel actions. So you have to be very cautious, especially in that situation. If any board member wants to discuss the superintendent's employment, you employ her or him, and you would just call for an executive session with counsel to discuss that matter.
Could potentially another avenue be, it could be a roundabout avenue, but kind of what you're talking about, if for some reason there's a concern, and what Mrs. Anderson said, like they're unwavering, could you request an agenda item that the board authorize a member then at that point to seek legal advice? I mean, it's not pretty if you can't go to your board president and you can't go to your superintendent. You have a situation obviously going on, and could you not then have an agenda item where you ask the majority of the board that they be given permission? I know we can vote on allowing someone to represent the board somewhere where we are authorizing that person to be the board representation for whatever it is. Could we not ask for an agenda item and say, you know, I really feel the need to seek legal counsel, and I would like permission from the majority of the board?
My concern there is then the majority doesn't really have an idea due to open meeting law what it's about to then be able to say yes or no.
Well, that's.
Madam President, Ms. Reese, you could ask for an agenda item to authorize an alternative board member to contact legal counsel. You can also, there's also the viable option of switching officers mid-year. So if the majority of the board feels that the board president's not representing the interest of the board as a whole. So.
Something else I would like to at least keep in mind as a board member individually, one thing I appreciate is that when that does happen, we're all given the same info. And I feel like the fact that avenues exist, so we can call an executive session or the roundabout, changing mid-year, those types of things. I just want to make sure that all of us are on the same footing. I think giving opportunities to do things that aren't currently already in place or aren't currently functioning, given the fact that as it stands, it is functioning, right? I think there is potential for problems, and it feels reminiscent of things that have happened in years past, and that you have certain individuals who are given directives or believe they're given directives because they viewed something that was said to them differently, and they're the only ones that have that information, and then that continues to happen, and it results in us being ineffective, right? Like, I think we are a governing body for a reason. This is something that we should do as a collective group, and so I guess I don't feel personally the way things are structured that we aren't getting the opportunity should this, doomsday scenario present itself. I think there are things in place, but I also think should that situation arise, my hope would be that more than just a singular board member is aware of the fact that things don't seem to be following through. So for example, I sent out an email saying, can you ask legal this? And I never get a response back, or my response is different. I think that gives us opportunity then to start looking at executive session, start doing those types of things, right? Because I just want to make sure we're all on the same page and have the same information, because that can get us into some not great situations.
And to that point, which is why I feel like we as board members all should have equal rights to be able to contact legal counsel in case there is a situation where we can't go through the super or or the board president.
I hear you on that. I think the only thing that gives me concern based off of what legal has expressed to us is the cost. I think it is important for us to keep in mind our goal is to try to make sure that we're spending money in an area that is beneficial to the larger community, beneficial to students. I believe that's why every single person is in this room at the end of the day, is for the students. And I guess my concern is, and instead of us channeling it through one of the two avenues to where if you get multiple, you can do it as one email instead of individual, the billing potential of that, the legal fees of that become really big. And then I feel like we have to stand up here and then defend why we are essentially wasting public funds for things that still have that opportunity, right? So like, I feel like if there is a situation that is of the magnitude with which you are describing, we have options that exist. I think funneling things to limit our prepaid legal cost is important when we are struggling to finance other things throughout district.
Well, I mean, you know, you look at the situation, we're all adults. We understand that we don't want to overspend and charge the district, you know, any extra funds. But, to, you know, and we keep that in mind when there are things that we might want to question. And obviously, if we can go through the superintendent and be able to ask them questions, we would do that. But as a last resort, to be able to have that right as a board member, to not be limited, and to know that if there is ever a situation where we can't go through these two people, that option does exist in policy, and anything else, minor questions or whatever it is, that yes, those, you know, we can go through them. But if there's a situation where we can't, then, and to be able to have that right as a board member.
But we do have that right, as it was expressed, right? We have the right to ask for an executive session. We have the right to do those things should you feel that situation arises. So again, I'm inclined to say funnel it through the channels that are currently in place as a policy that's been in place and has seemed to function just fine, to limit prepaid legal cost. And again, should the situation arise where we need that, we call an executive session and have the opportunity of doing that. And it also, again, gives the benefit is all of us as a board member, a governing body, are accessing that same information at the same time with legal counsel, separate of superintendent if you feel it needs to be. I don't think the last resort option doesn't exist. It does.
Right, but the cost of calling an executive session versus a phone call
But in the scenario you're creating, I think that's a legal fee I'm okay with if we have a superintendent who is skirting questions and refusing to go to legal. I think that is something I can stand and justify in front of the community and say, yes, I'm okay with paying this money, right? Because what may be a big issue to you may not be a big issue to me. And that's part of the reason why we funnel it in the same way. So you may view what I view as a level 2 as a level 4 and decide to contact and do that executive, or not the executive session, the extended legal fees, and that may not be the same place. Like I hear what you're saying. My point is the process already exists. We have those options, and should it be a situation that is a dire situation, I think an executive session is definitely warranted in that. Completely, because in that session we can talk about, do we look at new superintendent? Do we vote for a new president? I mean, I think those things exist, and that's why having an executive session to do that in those moments is part of policy.
So, Madam President, Ms. Van Hook, what I would suggest is that Ms. Van Hook has proposed language that she'd like to see as a second read. If you can send that language to Ms. Richards, then I will attempt to make those changes to the proposed policy, and it would come back for a second read. I don't hear consensus that this not move forward at this time, so.
Thank you. Moving on to action items. 8.1, ratify pay. I move that we ratify payroll and expense vouchers.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
I abstain from the vote.
Okay, motion passes 4-0-1. Thank you, 4-0-1. Moving on to action item 8.2, approval of overnight and/or out-of-state staff travel. I make a motion that we approve 8.2.
Seconded.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Oh,
Christina, do you vote?
I didn't know if there was any conversation before the vote.
Oh, questions, comments, concerns?
Because I'm assuming there's a reason it was pulled off.
Oh,
of
sorry.
Consent,
I'm
so.
just going down.
I do have some things to say about this. So looking at the NCTM Math Conference, I'd like to read some of the bios from the presenters. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce it correctly, but Jamila is the first speaker. While we may feel a sense of urgency to address deep-rooted equity issues, our attempts are often thwarted by landmines that can be identified and removed through strategic analysis, creative action, through storytelling, real-world examples. We explore why it is so hard to move equity work forward while beginning to find the courage to move towards next-generation models for school transformation and unhinge ourselves from a legacy of implementation over imagination. Second speaker, Kevin, let's identify the purpose of learning math, consider the existing structures and what changes should be made, examine how to equitably teach mathematics and help our students see themselves as capable learners. Equitably teaching math, I'm not sure what that means. But I would assume that everybody within our district is equally and equitably taught math. Julia and Karen, two math educators of color, challenge conventional wisdom and discuss essential non-negotiable elements needed to transform the math learning space to one that cultivates math joy and justice. Crystal Watson. Crystal has worked along other scholars to develop culturally responsive, reflective, and/or anti-racist curriculum resources that centers young people in every lesson. And those that don't know, culturally responsive teachings is the same as CRT, just in different words. Luke Wilcox. Luke believes that traditional lectures based on math class needs to be disrupted in order to achieve more equitable outcomes for all students. Last but not least, one of the workshops, necessary but not sufficient, building on 5 equity-based practices that impact identity in K-12 mathematics. In this pre-conference workshop, we discuss actionable strategies that K-12 teachers and leaders can use to go beyond equity as the ultimate goal. Working towards equity is a necessary but not sufficient step to counter white supremacy, anti-Blackness, xenophobia, and other systemic forces that act on and shape mathematics education. Wow. In this pre-conference workshop, we will explicitly discuss actionable strategies to dismantle systematic and anti-Black racism in K-12 mathematics. I don't know anybody who would say that there's anti-Black racism in math. If there is any racism in any of our classroom, I would expect for it to be reported, as racism is never okay, and neither is teaching anti-racism by being racist. The other travel conference that's on here is the NCECA conference, the National Council on Education for Ceramic Arts. Ceramic arts connects us to physical and cognitive experiences that foster environments of cultural equity, diversity, access, and inclusion. A ceramics conference, yet they still push this Marxist agenda. I guess these organizations have to keep up with their ESG scores. We continue to send our educators on taxpayer dime to events such as this that is, again, extremely divisive about DEI, social emotional learning, critical race theory. It's supposed to be math and ceramics conference. How about keeping it about math and ceramics instead of pushing and teaching Marxist agenda, which is one of the reasons why so many parents are pulling their kids from public education. At what point do we say we are for public education and we are going to do what is necessary to prevent parents from pulling their children? And that no, we will not participate in such training. The more we participate, the more they will keep doing it. If we truly cared about public education, we would stop funding these organizations. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
President Schultz, Board Member Van Hook. So there's a lot to cover, and I will do my best to keep it as succinct as possible. The first thing I'm going to address is the equitable practices in math, for example. IEPs ensure equitable practices. For example, you have some individuals who have difficulty with numbers. You have some individuals with difficulty recalling certain types of information. And so because of that, they have certain IEP accommodations to help bring them up to the same level. That's what equitable practices mean by that. It's not, the idea is we do want everybody to be equitable, but not everybody's at the same starting point and not everybody has the same toolbox available to them. So we make sure everybody has access to the same tools. I hear and understand that these words are troubling for you because we routinely have these types of conversations. But the nature of equitable practices in education is vital. Otherwise, students get ignored. Their needs, their desires, their ability to perform and shine for us is limited if we don't ensure that they have access to the same toolbox. As far as diversity in math, I am a white individual, so it is difficult for me to be able to express from a personal standpoint ways in which people are discriminated against for their outward appearance. What I can tell you with respect to math, and it is similar with respect to differing diversity groups, for example, we are all 4 women on this board and we all went to school at varying times in the past. Some of us were probably good at math and our teachers never encouraged us because we were women and the expectation was we couldn't do the same. The point of ensuring these types of training and ensuring these type of equitable practices is because we have biases that we're both aware of and sometimes unaware of. And so we want to make sure that we correct for these things to ensure that we're providing for all of our students, regardless of their circumstance, the opportunity to perform and shine in the same ways. I hear your concern with things like CRT. We have repetitively talked about how that's not taught in our schools, and that's all we can care about at the present moment, right? We have talked about how the importance of making sure our students succeed. All of us have talked about how it's for the students. These equitable practices are part of that, right? I hear that the language outwardly, especially if we're already primed to be reactive to some of these words, and then the conclusion is, well, it must be horrible. What I'm trying to express to you, especially in certain subject areas, there are an important need to create equitable practices because there are learning situations in which they don't have the same toolbox available. They don't have that opportunity. So I guess my question to you when you hear these types of things, we also have members of our community who are persons of color. We are 4 white women representing a community of diversity. There are some people in this community who are so very grateful that our teachers go to trainings that let them see their child, and they know that their child will be seen and heard and respected because of these types of training. If your concern is the curriculum that comes back, again, we have curriculum that's provided by the state. We have standards that are approved and go through us, and we have policies in place if you feel teachers aren't doing those things. But the words and the alarm that you are sounding as a result of some of these things aren't what's happening. And the practice and the need is a must, because students will suffer if we don't ensure these types of practices.
So are we saying that we have teachers currently that don't see children of color?
I'm saying the opportunity exists, and that's why we go through training, to learn what cultural norms are and to learn how to present these things.
How does this kind of training that our teachers attend, how does that look to our white students? I mean, it should apply to all the kids. There shouldn't be anything with color. We shouldn't be sending teachers to train on how to be anti-Black. If we have teachers that see a Black person as a problem, then they shouldn't be working. But these types of teachings are racist to begin with.
Ma'am, I hear you in that. I agree. In a perfect world, nobody should be racist. Full stop. The idea that we are colorblind or should be colorblind is non-existent. I'm white. Outwardly, you can see that I'm white. There's no denying that opportunity. The idea of equitable practices, and me as a white individual learning that there are aspects of cultural norms, there are aspects of differing diversity groups that I am not a part of, what that does is it makes me a better teacher to all of my students. Full stop. Our white students benefit just as much as our persons of color from equitable practices. We can actually prove it. When you look throughout history and you look at efforts we have made to expand civil rights, everyone is brought up. Everyone. When we make protections for ADA, students with disabilities, everyone benefits by these opportunities. That's all this is. It's not a big effort or focus. It's not as if any single person, and if they are, you're right, we should follow through with that. But we're not having teachers telling specific students that they should hate themselves for certain things or that they should do any of this. We're literally making our efforts to try to encourage every single person to say you can succeed. And part of that starts with training on how to ensure equitable practices, and it goes beyond just race. I need you to understand that. There are other things that as a teacher I can benefit from when I learn how to see and meet the needs of every single kid, and understanding that those differing needs just means a different set of tools that I can help raise up for success. Right now, we have a curriculum in place, and if you have students who are telling us that they are harmed by these things, we can talk about it. Right now, I don't see where the harm is in making sure our students get seen by all of our staff, and there is nothing within this that excludes that. Because again, equitable practices raise up everybody. That's how this works. We literally can prove it.
If you could, yeah, thank you. If you could just, so we could keep in control of the meeting, refrain from clapping, please.
Again, teaching anti-racism by being racist is not something that we should be sending our teachers to. There shouldn't be any type of racism happening within our schools. And if you say that there's no CRT being taught in our schools, you must have missed, maybe you weren't copied on it actually, now that I think about it, but there was a parent that emailed in about an assignment that their child was given at Sossaman that was completely CRT. So it does exist, and we don't need to be bringing the stuff back into our school and teaching our kids how to be anti a specific color, because kids don't give a crap about color. They are friends with whoever they're friends with based on whether they're nice or whether they're, however they're treated. And we shouldn't be having teachers bringing this stuff back to our schools. So that's all.
All right. As stated, whenever we dealt with the language conference, it's not part of our standards. I assume for math to teach certain topics. And I would assume that if a teacher walked into one of these trainings that was perpetuating or trying to make it seem like because you're a certain color, you're racist, or if you're not a certain color, you're not racist. I'm not saying, don't read into what I'm not saying. Or that certain races can't learn because people have been insulted by that as well. Then I imagine because it doesn't fall within our standards or it shouldn't be in our curriculum, that they would just walk right out of the seminar. And I want to believe that we have teachers that are capable of that and know better. And if they have questions or doubt themselves or whatever, that they reach out to our instructional coaches, they reach out to HR, they reach out to Ms. Richards if they need to. But I see both points. Absolutely, being a teacher, there are absolute limitations, and it can go too far, and it can push certain topics to go into areas that are untrue, or there's areas that absolutely need to be discussed. But let's stick to our standards. Let's stick to what our teachers know, what they should and should not be learning or teaching, I guess.
Any other comments, questions, concerns? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1. Moving on to 8.3, JICA student attire, third read. I move that we approve this motion. Questions, comments, concerns? And can I just say we've talked about this 3 times. So yeah. I think we've heard everybody's feelings and concerns. And yeah.
Well, thank you for letting us speak some more and expressing more. I went and listened to both meetings over again and wrote down some points that were never really clarified or that I just want to make sure that we come back to. It was brought up that there were 10 schools that have passed this trust policy. I'm sorry, thank you, districts. Thank you for correcting me. Those 10 districts, if I think you guys received them possibly, it's Arlington, which is between Gila Bend and Tonopah, Colorado River. Well, by the way, so Arlington passed the original one that we received the first time, I believe, and they have midriff included. Colorado River, which is in Bullhead City, they also have midriff in it. Dysart, which is in Surprise, midriff. Flagstaff has the language of front, back, sides, middle of thigh pants, or pants that go to the middle of the thigh. Kyrene, they have a regulation on theirs where they mention needs to cover the midriff. Lake Havasu also has a regulation with the language of midriff. Queen Creek. Now, Queen Creek is interesting. I called them because I said, hey, I want to listen to your meeting. I want to know the dialogue. I taught there. I didn't even know that there was a change. I was told that they did a all policy approval, possibly 1, maybe 2 days. Is that correct? You were there, I understand.
Madam President, Ms. Anderson, that's correct. They did a full reading in one board meeting, a study session, and then approval.
Okay. So I see it as, and correct me if I'm wrong, there wasn't huge dialogue on specific policies, if you will.
The governing board members asked questions as needed as we reviewed the policies. I don't remember any specific dialogue on this particular trust model policy.
Okay. And Queen Creek is one that does not have the word midriff in it. Santa Cruz, which is in Rico, Arizona, includes midriff. Sholo includes midriff. And Pima, which they had posted since, and they do include midriff. So it's one of the terms we've been battling over, to include or not include. Gilbert did not or has not passed this particular policy. Mrs. Reese in one meeting had asked what the definition, or what is midriff? How do we define midriff? So I just Googled it, and it's the area between the chest and the waist. So that's what they're saying, specifically that area to be covered. The neighboring districts, so I looked up theirs. So we have Tempe L. Their language says cover chest and torso, and the clothes to not be see-through. Tempe High School, and these are in regulations, by the way, the language, to cover the private parts, stomach, back, chest, undergarments, and not be see-through. Apache Junction was pretty much the exact same language as Tempe L. Chandler, wear clothes. Just don't be disruptive. Gilbert was in a regulation. It said cover all private parts and don't be see-through. Mesa, cover midriff, private parts, and don't be see-through. Now, the language of torso, because I thought, well, cover chest and torso, that seemed like the same. And it is. It really is redundant to say that. But the torso is defined as the human body apart from the head, the neck, the arms, and the legs. So basically includes shoulders, chest, lower abdomen, back, and buttocks. I had to even just look, what do you mean torso, and what do you mean those areas? So I'm reading these out specifically because Ms. Reese, you were looking for good language, and I'm trying to find, maybe there's something in other policies that you would appreciate and maybe help guide us to getting the language right. So I do not mean to be condescending in any of this or take up your time, but I just want to point out some policies that are out there. Our current policy that we have in place, GB EB-R, so that is the regulation for staff, and I'm going to kick myself because it's buried in all my documents, but it states that teachers should dress to be an example for students. So we expect them to dress, literally says for students. So if we already have that expectation in how they dress, then I imagine we would want to follow through with our dress code that it is similar to that. It's in our policy. I believe our current policy, the one that we're not approving, but what is already in place, is similar to most of the neighboring districts or those that approve the trust language. And I feel like it's pretty open. We allow piercings. There's no language that says no piercings. We allow tattoos, so there's no language that says you can't have tattoos. We can have changing hair color. You express it. Hats. Back in our day, you couldn't wear hats. Even leggings. Those tight yoga pants. I don't care. Tank tops, wear it. Wear a tank top. It doesn't even mention spaghetti straps. It just mentions about showing the bra straps. And even myself, I get it, you know. It's incidental. A bra strap will show. We're not going to dress code girls because that happens. Our current policy has no language. In fact, nobody has mentioned spaghetti straps in our past 2 meetings, but it keeps getting brought up like we had. I just want to make sure that that's clear. Our current policy does not require any measuring either, so there's all this mention of measuring. We currently do not require measuring in our policy, current policy. I'm not against males and females wearing tank tops or even spaghetti straps, the incidental exposure straps on undergarments. In fact, that's language in a lot of those too. No matter the decision, what we make, a group will be or feel or will claim to be disproportionately impacted. I had males who believed males were dress coded more often than females. And then I went and asked the females, and they felt like they were dress coded more than more than the males. I've asked over 10 female students, current and recently graduated, their thoughts on current dress code. And I made it a point to survey those who were less conservative or not conservative, and those that were conservative, I asked for their opinions. And as Ms. Wade implied at a March meeting, the students were pretty tough, and they were pretty strict on the expectations. Oh, was it Ms. Reese that said that? I apologize. Well, kudos to both of you. I specifically asked the less conservative females if they felt like having a dress code with our current policies, expectations, so cover the midriff, the chest, the buttocks, if it made them feel like their body was not okay. Unanimously, they're like, no. And I'm not naive, personally, I'm not naive to think these females' opinions speak for all females, but it's important to know that not all females feel a dress code like ours makes them feel shameful or bad about their body. I also inquired about feeling sexualized with the dress code, and again, it was unanimous. The response was no. One response from a female stated that stores, songs, movies, and shows market the sexualization of females. I do find interesting, if we're going to talk about disproportionate, avid volleyball player, I've played high school and college. I recently, watching the games, if you look at the girls' shorts versus the male shorts, completely two different lengths. Girls are very, very short, and the males are like basketball shorts almost. They're a pretty decent length. So, I'm just putting that out there. And we brought a lot about business. So a dress code, school or business, has the sole purpose of promoting professional demeanor, personal respect, professional respect, and focus on the matters of the environment. We are not saying skin is not professional. We are saying that there is a professional and respectable disposition that can show skin in moderation. We are a school district in which students are mandated to attend. We are not a Parks and Rec entity. In school, just like in jobs, there is a time and place for certain dress. Not all places of employment have the same expectations for dress, but the majority of different career fields and jobs available have dress codes that expect employees to cover their midriff, their bust, and their buttocks for decency, for the representation of the business, for safety, for camaraderie and professionalism. These are some places I went to. I went to department stores, professional dress, covered. Engineering firms, covered. They can wear shorts now, by the way. Some of those firms are pretty casual. Grocery stores, covered. Gaming stores, covered. Medical offices, of course. Construction companies and sites, covered. Financial institutions, hardware stores, hotels, an airline and an airport. Emergency responders, city offices I've been in, legal offices. Now, restaurants is interesting, and I might be a little too open in my past life, but, so I've gone to, I believe, 2 breweries, if you will. The dress was, there were some short shorts and there were some midriffs, but that was a brewery, and hey, it was laid back and we were all enjoying the evening. I may or may not have been to some other entertainment type venues where there was not a lot of clothes on. I'll mention Hooters. Hooters would be one example, not very covered, but this was interesting whenever I was Googling Hooters. So Hooters recently amends their uniform policy after employees condemned disturbing new shorts. So Hooters wanted the girls to wear shorts beyond the shorts that, I don't know the last time you've been, but pretty short, to where the girls were describing them as underwear. Like, it's short. And they did not want to wear them. And it created such a backlash that Hooters had to say, okay, you can choose which short shorts you can wear. I found that interesting. There was a comment from a public member, or a member of the public, regarding my research on the top 100 schools that I think the language was 3 of the top schools have a minimal dress code, and that's 3 of the best. I just like my students, I welcome the challenge, and I did. I sat my butt back down and I went through all of it again. Well, I got to 49. I'm like, I'm done. If I could just borrow your ears for a second, just so you know, I don't want to give you false information. That is not my intentions at all. The top, and this was 22-23. When I went to it today, they had already switched to, I'm sorry, that was 21-22. That was all they had. And then as of today, they were already at 22-23. And there's been minor adjustments, not big. But the top school, which I believe is still #1 to this past school year, is in Virginia. Their language says, I'm picking the ones that would, anyway, so you cannot expose genitalia, chest, buttocks, underwear, or undergarments due to transparency, length, or lack of coverage, all right? And then we go to school #2, which is in South Carolina. Undergarments shall not be exposed at any time. Clothing shall not reveal bare skin between the upper chest and mid-thigh. Shorts, skirts, and dresses shall be of adequate length and is to assure modesty. And if that's not enough, there's more if you need me to go further, but I figured that was enough to drive that point for the second highest school. The third school was in Indiana. Wearing low-rise baggy or sagging pants that reveal any skin or undergarments is prohibited. See-through or sheer garments are prohibited. Length of shorts or skirts should be at least fingertip length when arms are resting at the side of the body. The wearing of low-cut tops or blouses should be avoided. #4 is in Miami, Florida. Any revealing clothes or tight outfits or items with graphics that are offensive or create disruption, inadequate coverage, any revealing clothes or tight outfits, and again, inadequate coverage. I'm just highlighting the language. #5 was in Chicago. Now, they were one of them that didn't have specific. They just went to having sexual explicit images, suggestive clothing, or pornography on their clothes. And it's the administration will make the determination if it's bad or not adequate or not. The 6th one, Reno, Nevada, absolutely could not find anything for their school. And there's one that I called and emailed and still didn't get a response. I just find that odd. #7 in Tennessee, any dress considered too revealing will not be allowed. See-through outfits, bare midriffs, open backs, low-cut tops, tube tops, tank tops, halter tops. Do you see how our district is a little, I don't know, I don't want to say better, but not as, I'm looking for a word. You know what I'm getting at. #8, Dallas, Texas. Halter tops you can't have, revealing or provocative. The length of the dresses, skirts, and shorts will be no shorter than fingertip length. Going on to #9 in Georgia. Shirts that expose the waist and or cleavage are not allowed. Low cut, see-through, and or backless shirts. The pants, shorts, and skirts must be worn at the waist. So #10 is, I'll just stop at #10 just so we can go to the top ones, is in Pennsylvania. Shorts and skirts must be at knee length or longer. Garments intended to be used as undergarments must be covered appropriately. Sleeveless tank tops and camisole tops are not permitted. Tube tops, tops that reveal midriff, and exposed backs are not permitted. So those are our top 10. There's one that wasn't very detailed, just said the admin will determine, and there's one I could not find, top 10. If you need me to go further, I absolutely will. I'll hang out afterwards if you're willing. But I've got like 80 pages in here, so if you want me to keep going? No. I'm just kidding. But Christina, I don't know if any of that language helped out, if there's anything in there you felt more comfortable with, or anybody on the board that you felt more comfortable with, but I'm hoping I'm driving home that neighboring school districts and top 100 school districts appreciate a modest dress.
Thank you. Mrs. Richards, you sent this dress code out to admin, correct?
We collected informal input from them, yes.
And what was the feedback that you got from that? Based on, I'd like to know what our administrative feels comfortable with and what they're comfortable with and how they feel about the dress code, because they're every day seeing the kids and they're in the schools.
So President Schultz, overall, the feedback that I received was that they were okay with what was being proposed, you know, and they said things like, well, if we're gonna let them wear hats, can we have specific training on what that means, or hoodies, or whatever? So I think whatever is determined, it's our responsibility to make sure we all interpret things the same way, if that makes sense. So overall, that's what they said about these proposed policy and regulation.
We would create the policy, but then then you would create the regulations, such as, I'm guessing, showing your face would be
Yeah.
with a hat on. You can't walk with it, but
Right.
that would be part of the regulations that you would set
Right.
forth after that.
But I
But this would
think-
just be our overall general policy. Like during testing, yes. Sorry.
Yeah, and there are times where I got feedback about kids expressing themselves. Sometimes they did want a hoodie on if they were having a hard day, or they did want their hat on if they were having a hard day. So,
It was a comfort mechanism for them, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So, I mean, overall, the feedback we received was they were okay with it. They just want to make sure if they do have questions that we all work together to say, just kind of like what we're talking about. Yeah. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Other questions, comments, or concerns?
I just want to point out also that the amount of emails that we got in support of a modest dress code should also be considered. The majority was parents asking for a modest dress code. And just definitely need to consider those voices as well.
Ms. Reese?
I agree, but I think that we all need to take it into consideration. But I know there was emails that it was just sent to me. Nobody else was listed. Now, if they sent it to the board individually, I don't know. I would say it was pretty kind of half and half, pretty even on, I think that it's fine, and others are wondering why we're even looking at changing it. So, and that is something that I have considered with reading my emails and what I've received. I do appreciate the regulation because it does put a little more definition to it, that there's some thought there instead of it just being so wide open. But I want to say too is the last couple of weeks I've been on different school campuses, and I want to say the majority of our kids are dressed appropriately. I've not seen one of them going, okay, hold on. And I mean, my kids were raised pretty conservatively. I don't think my oldest daughter ever wore pants until she was probably in 7th grade. She believed in long skirts, and are you sure you don't want some shorts? Nope, everything was long skirts and everything. So my kids were raised pretty conservatively. And so I'm pretty sensitive to some of that. I probably have a little more sensitivity on, like, well, that's a little revealing. But no, being on high school campuses, nothing stood out and was like, oh my gosh, like, this is horrible. And I think that for the most part, they dressed fine. I didn't see where it was a huge issue where I was concerned of a wardrobe malfunction or anything. So I think we've spent a lot of time on this. I think we've heard from community on both sides that it's fine. The change is okay. And like I said, I trust our kids. I think our kids make good choices. But our policy currently says no midriffs. And we see some of it, though. Not inappropriate, not too short, but we see some of that middle stomach showing.
Because it's not fully being. That's what you were saying, you were seeing midriffs not covered, and you were okay with that?
That it was not, right, looking at it going, oh my gosh, they need to cover up. That it wasn't offensive, it wasn't, I didn't see people like looking at other people. So yes, I mean, the kids are dressing, and people have said, we're already dressing this way and this and that. But it wasn't over-revealing. It wasn't, in my mind, what my worst fear was, like, oh my gosh, we're going to have these tube tops, and we're going to have, these things. And, you're hoping that they're learning this at home, and they're addressing what is appropriate to their home life. That we all teach our kids what our own limitations are acceptable. And that for some parents, it's a little more than others. But again, like I said, being on these, because let's be real, the dress code is about middle school and high school. I don't think we really see, if an elementary school is showing their midriff, it's probably they're growing pretty fast and they didn't keep up with the change of clothes. So I did not see anything that our current kids are wearing, even though it was outside of our current dress code, that was concerning. And so it kind of goes back to, we talk about trusting our teachers. We do need to teach our kids self-respect, and we do need to teach, and that's boys and girls, not just girls. We need to teach boys and girls self-respect and respect for each other as people. And I didn't see anything that was concerning that's currently going on. And I don't think with the change in dress code, that's going to all of a sudden make a shift, and that we're going to see that. They're going to make the same decisions. The beauty of it is that this policy doesn't have to be forever. And if we do notice that shift, if we do have issues, if we're finding that we are really having to worry about this and that we're having issues, and we have kids that are concerned and it makes them uncomfortable, and we can change this policy at any time. And if we find that the new policy does not work well, we can revisit it and we can change it. And if we need to pull it back because it's just too open and it's causing things to be too revealing, there's always unintended consequences on things. And you can play things in your mind and you can estimate. And there's some things you can't anticipate. And if there are, we can bring it back. And we can look and see, what do we need to do? If we notice a shift in how our classrooms are, we need to listen to our teachers, we need to listen to our admin, and I appreciate you talking to our admin. They're the ones who have to enforce it. And if they're comfortable with it, because that was my concern, is that it is vague. If we do have issues, if there are concerns on it's not being enforced equally or properly, Like I even said before, when we first started talking about dress code, in high school, middle school, a kid should not get to third or fourth hour, and that's the first time they're being dress coded. Then there's a problem. And if we have those issues, we can revisit that. So I really paid attention to what I was seeing on our campuses. And is it what I would tell my kid that they can wear? Probably not, but that's my parent responsibility to tell my kid what they can and can't wear. This is ensuring that we do have a practice. A dress code is an expectation, and we have an expectation for our students, and it's not a business, we can't expect them to be professional. And Mrs. Anderson, I appreciate that you mentioned our staff dress code being the example, because I still think that's important, that they see how professionals dress. They're not professionals yet, they're kids, and they're still learning. We need to teach them, but I think that I don't think this dress code teaches them not to be a good person. I don't think the dress code teaches them not to have to adapt. When you get a job, you have to adapt to whatever that dress code is, whether it be a uniform, whether it be, like you said, an engineering firm that now they can wear shorts, whether it be a construction site where they have to wear a certain kind of steel-toed boots. Those are your dress codes, and they just need to know that whatever that is, they have to follow it. So if they're not following our dress code, there's consequences, just as any other dress code. So I did try and pay attention when I was on campuses specifically, and sometimes that I was just like purposely like, what are they wearing? Okay, I gotta see, what are they wearing and everything, but I didn't see the issues I thought I was going to see.
All right, voting? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 3-2. Moving on to 8.4, I move that we approve direction given to legal counsel during the executive session identified as agenda item 1.2 above.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Hold on, I'm an aye, just a second. Trying to keep up.
Oh,
Sorry.
So you seconded? I did second.
Amanda?
I'm an aye.
Okay, motion carries 5-0. Moving on to future agenda items, 9.1.
I would like to add something to a future agenda item. Given statements that were made earlier today, I would like if we as the board can get, I don't know, like a presentation of sorts on how much prepaid legal fees are costing this year in comparison to 2 years in the past. If, you know, like, and by your estimation, as you're involved in this, like, what is causing it? What are the reasons? Is there just certain things that are happening or whatever? But I would really kind of be interested in that to try to figure out why we're spending substantially more.
Yeah, where it's coming from, I think that's great.
Yeah.
I was concerned by those comments as well.
Uh-huh. And I mean, I don't know what to include in it, those types of things, as far as like what you're after, whether or not, you know, what the reasoning is and how that comes up. I would assume that's not something we can look at neighboring districts for in terms of like what theirs looks like or whatever, but sometimes comparisons in those ways are also beneficial.
Maybe it is something we can compare to neighboring districts? No, we can't really? Okay.
No.
I just didn't know what the trust. Go things into it, yeah, and size, everything. Okay, well, you're just taking into those considerations. All right, anything else?
Yep, I just want to say thank you for continuing to update the student art in the boardroom. I've noticed, and it's beautiful, and in the hallways, so thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Board initiatives. I think that's it.
President Schultz, I want to add, like, future agenda item, we had a request for an update on ESI.
Okay.
So we're going to add that at some point for you guys.
Okay, perfect, thank you. With that, I hope everybody has a great, well, I was going to say have a great fall break and then adjourn. I hope everybody has a great fall break. Thank you very much. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you, be safe.